What I've seen again and again is the single largest predictor of people's ability to build good products on chain is whether they use products on chain. Literally like 10x difference. And people who don't use products on chain, they can like literally 0% of the time build good products on chain. And so that's what I've been trying to live. It's just like use these things.
Episode 25 in Invest in Music with Jesse Pollak. Today we're here to talk about BASE and the launch of Onchain Summer. Jesse talks about the significance of being on-chain, what it means to bring a billion builders on-chain, and much, much more. As a reminder, you can collect this episode on investinmusic.xyz. It's actually our first episode that we're minting on BASE to commemorate this podcast, and it was quite an awesome episode. We talk a lot about the cultural significance of what it means to be on-chain, the music NFT event in Denver, throwing a party in Paris, and much, much more. So without further ado, let's get into it. Episode 25 of Invest in Music with Jesse Pollak of BASE. We are back. We got Jesse Pollak, the man, the myth, the legend, Onchain Summer. Jesse, how are we feeling today, man?
Feeling good. It's Wednesday. It's the second to last day of August, which means that it's the second to last day of our planned on-chain summer activities. So feeling pretty grateful, pretty proud, a little tired after a long August.
Seriously. I mean, I swear you've been on maybe 10 to 15 different podcasts over the course of the last month or two. And before that, I'd like to say that you were a pretty low-key guy. So I'm curious to hear, how has the public eye been for you?
Yeah, I really tried to stay off of the internet. I didn't show my face. I had a Twitter presence, but I definitely wasn't doing a ton of public appearances. And then really in the last 6 months, it's increased. And yeah, I've done a bunch of podcasts and stuff like that, but also every day in August, I've done a live stream that we do on-chain summer stories. So that's like a 15-minute story about someone coming on chain, the product, the experience. And so that's been really cool. It's been cool to have my first kind of like direct messaging and get to experiment with my voice there. But it's been a lot of fun. Challenging, a little exhausting to keep up the pace, but people have been so positive and energized. I feel like I've just kind of ridden that energy.
That's right. I mean, it's safe to say that you're a certified influencer at this point.
Well, I have also started doing some like selfie video recordings and posting them on Twitter, and that really makes me feel like, okay, now I'm like experimenting with influencer stuff. And as we're thinking about what's next for BASE, our vision is to bring the next billion people on chain. And I think one of the things we're thinking a lot about is how do we reach those people? And one of the places that we're planning to experiment with is TikTok, Instagram stories, more kind of like Gen Z focused messaging that does that kind of direct conversation about like what is on chain, how can it change your life, how can it make you have a better business, have a better friendships, better connections with things you care about, and so I'm excited to get to experiment with that a little bit and see how it goes.
Let's go down that rabbit hole for a second, because communicating on-chain world to traditional fans has been something that I've struggled a lot with. I think my favorite thing to see on TikTok is on-chain artists talking about their music and then people in the comments just shitting on them because NFTs are dead and everyone hates it. So I'm curious to hear, what do you think the strategy is to bring BASE to TikTok?
I think it's about kind of like turning the page on the last like few years of language and the last few years of culture. Like we're not talking about NFTs, we're not talking about speculation, we're not talking about this like scary crypto financial thing. Instead, we're just talking about a new global economic platform it's on chain. It's like the internet. It's the next generation of the internet that is changing people's lives. And I think in music particularly, I've talked to a lot of artists who've gone from being kind of traditional artists to being on-chain artists and publishing their work on chain. And the thing that I hear pretty consistently from them is I made this transition and it changed my life. Like literally, right? Like before I wasn't making money and now I'm making money. Like before I didn't have the time to do my creative pursuits and now I have the time to do my creative pursuits. And I think that like that message, the message of there's a new place where you can create, and instead of, you losing 80% of the value to TikTok or Instagram or whoever, and instead of you being at the behest of them and kind of at the will of them when they change their policies, you keep all the value and you create on your own terms. And you get to keep everything from a sovereignty perspective. Like, I think that's a message that can land with people. And I think that it is landing with people. And I'm excited to tell it more broadly.
That's correct. And I think one of the challenges there is that I think that's been a narrative that's made being on chain work for those creators who are here today. I think one of the interesting things to recognize that as more creators come on chain, the opportunity for each of those creators to live sustainably off of their collections is going to be harder and harder. I mean, you're seeing that now with the mint prices on sound coming down. The average drop is kind of grossing a lot less than it used to before. And from my perspective, this is very realistic and healthy because you can no longer just mint something on chain and make thousands of dollars because you learned how to download MetaMask. There's becoming this normalization where as more people come on chain, there's a lot more opportunity and supply to go and seek out. But that also means that creators do have to work harder to kind of capture that value in the first place. And I'm really curious to hear how that kind of plays into your thoughts around Onchain Summer and all the work that you guys have been doing to really spotlight these new projects.
Yeah, and I think that also kind of plays into the thing that we need to turn the chapter on. It's like there's no one weird trick here, right? Like it's not like, oh, you just come here and like everything's going to work magically. Like, you still have to do hard work. You still have to be creative. You still have to be someone who's really like putting in the effort. But you have new tools that allow you to do that better and allow you to keep more of what you earn and allow you to create more like impactful things than you otherwise would have. And so I think that shift from like a get quick or get rich quick to like, no, this is same in many ways, except for it's more empowered, is a part of the narrative shift that we have to land. In terms of how we have kind of like thought about that with Onchain Summer, I think a lot of what we've been trying to do is just like tell this story and lift up people who have been kind of examples of this story and show the world like it's happening. And it's still small, it's still early, but it's happening right before our eyes. And it's been so inspiring to see like the response. You have folks who are like, wow, like, I participated in this. And I got on the consumer side, you have folks who participated. I got on chain. I like got to do something cool with art or music or games or advocacy or whatever it is, and it worked. And I now can do more of this. That's been on the kind of consumer side, and then on the creator side, I think we continue to see stories of whoa, like hey, this was a really new way of reaching fans. This was a new way for me to earn money, and seeing those stories. You only need people to see one or two of those stories to connect the dots of what's possible here. I think that's really all we're trying to do. Like our mantra this summer has been like, get on chain this summer. And I think, you can take out the this summer part and it's like, it's get on chain. And the thing we are trying to do is connect the dots sufficiently that someone takes one action or two actions that brings them onto this new platform, gets them the tools to use it so that they can experience what's happening here and lean into it more every day.
That's right. And I think what I've been so impressed about with you is not only do you have such a great energy about the way you've been communicating BASE publicly, like whether it be on Twitter or these interviews that you're talking about, but you're just really active on chain. And I think that that's so important to communicate here because there's a big air that comes with kind of being in Web3, quote unquote, being like an NFT collector. But something that I look for a lot is just like how actively is this person transacting on chain? And I think something that I've really been impressed by with you is I see you minting all the time. I see you really active on platforms like Farcaster and now Friendtech, et cetera. And it's really just amazing to see someone that's playing such a pivotal role in this ecosystem using the technology. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of times when, founders or team members of these platforms, et cetera, they build these things. But I think that there's just a separation between like what the average end user is experiencing on a day-to-day basis from what's being built. And I feel like you've done a really good job of just putting yourself right in the mix just to feel it for yourself.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And like my mantra and my like consistent message to the whole BASE team has been like, there's literally nothing more impactful that each of us can do than getting on chain. Because what I've seen again and again, because I've been, at Coinbase trying to figure out how do we transform this company? How do we bring it on chain? And what I've seen again and again is the single largest predictor of people's ability to build good products on chain is whether they use products on chain. Like literally like 10x difference. And people who don't use products on chain, they can like literally 0% of the time build good products on chain. And so that's what I've been trying to live. It's just like use these things every day so I can build better intuition around what's going to work, what's not going to work, who should we be supporting, who should we be investing in. And that's been one big part of it. Another big part, and I was just talking about this with someone else at BASE, is there's this like like, so Base launched, and there's all these people who are putting their creativity onto Base. They're minting things, they're building games, and I've been, minting all the things that they've created, and I've been playing all the games, and all of it is economic value flow, right? Like when I mint someone's NFT that they published, I'm sending them a little bit of ETH, and it does two things. One, it gives them recognition. Like they're like, whoa, like I feel seen, and someone's engaging with my work. And then two, it gives them resources. It gives them money. And so one of the ways I've been thinking about my on-chain activity is alongside it being a like really great way for me to learn, it's also a way where I could literally stimulate the Base economy and the Base creator ecosystem, the Base builder ecosystem, and say, I see you and I want to support you. And even if it's me minting 10 $1 things, that's $10 that go into the pocket of someone who just created something. And that's going to be that much more kind of like inspiration and that much more confidence and resources for them to go and do the next thing. And that's like, it's really, we're building an ecosystem, but this is really the first time where that's even possible, right? Mm. Like that I could go and have probably had thousands of interactions at this point over the last month where I've done like micro investments or micro grants to people just because they're bringing creativity on chain. I think that that's a really incredible thing.
I mean, it's so powerful because once you start transacting on networks like Base, you really can't go back. Like with all due respect, I go back and I mint on mainnet now and now I'm paying $3 and then I'm waiting, 30 seconds to a minute. And I sound really jaded saying this, but it's like on Base, you just press mint and then it's done in a second. Done. There's no gas cost and it's just instant and it just feels so clean. And I think it's hilarious that it's taken us this long to get to a state where you can actually use on-chain applications at similar parity to what it feels like to be using Twitter, Instagram, or all these apps that we've been using for years prior to it.
Yeah, well, it's suddenly and then all at once. It feels like, when is L2 ever going to come? And then really this summer, it feels like, oh my God, like who's transacting on L1 anymore? Like, Why would you do that? It's like these things are so alive. And I don't know, I just feel grateful to be here at this moment in time where it feels like we are really we are at the beginning of the next generation of the internet. And it feels fun in the way the first generation of the internet and the beginning of the first generation of the internet felt. Like things like Base Paint, where like people are just like doing raw creativity in a collaborative way with a new format that like everyone's just understanding for the first time. I mean, what a special, special moment for all of us to be here.
100%. And I really want to zoom in on what you said earlier about the significance of the word on-chain, because you were actually one of the very first people who I started seeing using that word so prominently on Twitter. And I'll shout out Jacob from Zora here, but, I put out a post recently about 100%, like on-chain music as the definition for what's going on the music side of things. To the point we made earlier about like, starting a new chapter here, I think it's so important to zoom in on why that word is significant because it allows us to think more expansively about what's possible. And I think that when it comes down to using that word, it's so powerful to recognize that on-chain does not have like one core definition to it and can encompass so many different things. And I'm really curious to hear about when this word on-chain really started to make its way into your orbit and how that kind of played its way into branding something as significant as Onchain Summer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, huge credit to Jacob from Zora, who I like. He was the first person I heard on-chain from, or really, he was the first person I saw on-chain as one word from. Yep. And I think that was probably in like late 2021, early 2022. And I think throughout 2022, I started to kind of integrate it into my vocabulary and started to talk about it, use it on kind of the internet. And then as we were launching Base and we were starting to see, oh wow, like L2s are starting to really grow. It feels like there's all this energy. Kind of early this spring, I think like directly after testnet, it's like, this is all going to happen this summer. Like it's going to be on-chain summer. And like, that's going to be a movement. It's going to be a moment that, catalyzes this next generation of the internet, the next era of crypto. And so I think it was pretty organic. Like, I don't feel like there's one moment where like, this is it. It's more like this is just became a part of our vernacular. And then as we were going to launch, it felt like it's on-chain summer. Like this is even something we're doing. This is a movement that's bigger than us that we just get to be a part of. And I'm also grateful for you, Coop, for all of your like energy behind on-chain summer and the concept. I mean, Coop threw the first on-chain summer event in Paris, which was a banger. It was like the speakers could have been better. We were commiserating about that. We were there, but like from a vibe and energy and attendance perspective, it was like the beginning of summer. Like everyone was there. There was great music. There's so much excitement. Like people really felt that energy, and then I feel like that energy in many ways translated into the next few months that have been just so much fun.
100%. And it was such an honor being able to partner with you on that because this word on chain has been so refreshing for me as someone who's talking to artists and people here in Los Angeles on a day-to-day basis. If you bring up the word NFT, it immediately changes the tone of the conversation. If you bring up the word on chain, people start to ask you questions like, what does that mean? Like, I have a directional idea because I know you and I know that you're into crypto, but it allows you just to reformat the conversation. And I think specifically for events like what we did in Paris, it really does feel like it's a new chapter. Like it reminds me a lot of like the energy around DeFi very early on before that became a popular thing, you know, DAOs, NFTs. Like I've really strongly committed to the idea that this term on chain is going to be the expansive, you know, terminology that we're using to really build this new ecosystem from here on out. So I just love that there's alignment where it doesn't need to be about one specific pocket. It sort of to me symbolizes accessibility to an entirely new generation of applications and this sort of whole social graph that comes around it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it is really remarkable. Like, I've spent a decade at this point trying to talk to people about crypto, and there's something about the word on chain that is different than every other word I've used in the past. And it's the analogy to online. It's the ease with which it like fits into people's mental models. Like you can say on chain anything, and I can now map it to, oh, this is like a new way of doing that thing. Like you could say online anything, and that was a new way of doing anything. And there's also like what I've stopped defining on chain up front. I just start using it in conversation with people. And then this almost always the same interactions happen, which is they just go along with it and they like engage and they take it at face value. And then I'm a little bit into conversation. They're like, so what is on chain? And I'm like, oh, on chain is like online, but it's powered by Ethereum and the blockchain. And they're like, okay, cool. That makes sense. And then we just keep going. Like I've had that same interaction probably hundreds of times at this point. And that intuitive connection that people can make is like so different than having to try and explain to people like what is Web3 or like what is blockchain or crypto. Like there's something about the word and the closeness to online, the analogy that can be drawn there that just lets people like slip into it and be comfortable slipping into it as a new mental model for the way the world is evolving.
I think it just feels a lot more natural. You know, I think that when you hear people start to use terms like Web3, like NFTs, blockchain, et cetera, like it becomes very overwhelming very fast. And unless there is like a really hot market trend where people making a ton of money really fast, people do not want to participate in it. And I think it's the reason why I've been so excited about what I'm seeing on Base. And we'll go into things like friend tech and the stuff that's been happening lately, but it's just symbolized a really new chapter of activity. You know, I was listening to your podcast with Adam Levy yesterday, shout out Mint Podcast. And you were talking about how, the new dating apps in crypto are just going to be a representation of what you're holding in your wallet, you know, and it's like, it doesn't need to be this brand new thing of like, here's this on-chain dating app. It's just like, you just happen to have things in your wallet because you're just transacting on a daily basis. And that's going to create a social graph. And I think that intention to really allow your online identity to be reflected by virtue of what you're holding on chain is such a powerful statement to make.
Yeah, it really is. It's, you know, we use this word builder in Base, like we're trying to bring up a million builders on chain. But one of the things I've been thinking about recently, and credit to Light, 0x Light, who's an incredible thinker, and we were talking about this, and he was like, I think you shouldn't say like a million builders and a billion users. You should just say a billion builders. Because I feel like whenever people are doing anything on chain, they're building it in some way. And to connect this back to your example of like, you know, your identity in the social graph, it's like every time you mint something on chain or every time you transact on chain, you are building your on chain identity. And that's not an on-chain identity that someone can take away from you. It's not owned by Facebook or Twitter. That is fundamentally yours. And so like you would build your worth, or you would build your brand, or you would build your wealth, or you would build a business, like you're now building your identity on chain. And every single thing you do on chain, you're building in some way. And that is this new possibility where you're not building for someone else. You're not giving away something. You're building for yourself. And I love that. I love that idea that this
Mm.
platform enables us to take all of the things that we've historically done, but kind of lost sovereignty and lost control of, and do them in a new way where fundamentally every single action is us building something that's valuable to us.
It's really funny because I remember during the peak of the last bull market, I tweeted something along the lines of like, your wallet is a reflection of who you are. And people got so mad at me because they were like, I am not these, degenerate NFTs that I'm minting on a daily basis. I was like, you kind of are. I mean, like you're minting it at the end of the day. So I'm just kind of glad now that like when I go and I browse Lens and Farcaster and I see, Jacob post a picture of Farcaster's daily active users, like I can mint that and like kind of symbolize that I'm part of this moment. It feels like we're just expanding the opportunity on what that can mean for your wallet to represent your identity. Because I think before it was so speculative that people would get really mad if you saw like 1,000 dying dingoes in their wallet, you know what I mean? Versus now it feels like the stuff you're collecting can actually represent who you are in a lot more authentic way.
Yeah, it's really special. It is, and it's a new behavior that, man, I feel like I'm addicted to. Like I collect on base. It's really sad. I mean, not sad. It's exciting. It's awesome. But like I'm like, collecting 10 things a day, and it all feels. It's so fast. It's so cheap. It just works. It's really cool. It's a really cool new thing that's happening.
I want to zoom out for a minute because we went very deep down the rabbit hole very fast there. Why don't you go and take us back to the beginning here? Obviously Base has been an extremely big undertaking for you guys. It's been the product of many years of work at this point, but I think a lot of people are now just becoming familiar with it by seeing it from things like Onchain Summer. Go back to the very beginning and why don't you explain to people what it means to build a layer 2 network from the ground up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Coinbase at the beginning of 2017, right before that bull market happened. I never like managed any, well, I managed like one person before, but I'd never really done it. And I just joined as an engineer, and then I spent 4.5 years just trying to scale the business. And so pretty quickly they were like, you managed one person before. Why don't you manage an engineering team? And then it was like 2 engineering teams and 5 engineering teams until I was managing a few hundred people. And all of that was building our consumer facing products. So Coinbase, Coinbase Pro, Coinbase Wallet. And then late 2021, I took a step back from that basically because I wanted to get closer to the metal of on-chain and like figure out what could I do to push forward this platform such that we could get to 1 billion people. And the mandate that came back from talking with, the Coinbase leadership team and the ecosystem and doing a bunch of experiments was like, go figure out how to bring Coinbase on chain. Like figure out what it means to take a 10-year-old business that is a crypto business and is the world's largest like public company crypto business, but was many ways like it's just a Web 2 business that was started in 2012 before Ethereum existed, before smart contracts existed, and figure out how to transform it into the next generation of the internet. And so I spent 2 years trying to figure out what that meant. We tried a bunch of things, none of them worked. And every single time we basically got stuck in the same place, which is that we want to build this product on chain that's going to enable Coinbase to move more of itself on chain, whether that's identity or a marketplace or advertising or trading. But if we were to build it on chain today on Ethereum, it would be too expensive. And we couldn't actually reach the scale of the millions of users that, are using Coinbase products. And so after running into that problem a bunch, we basically said, hey, like we know that Ethereum layer 2, which is a scaling layer on top of Ethereum that enables you to use all the applications that are on Ethereum, but at 100x cheaper price. We know that that's emerging, but it's still really immature. The tooling's not great. The scalability is not there. The centralization is not quite there. The adoption is definitely not there. Like, let's figure out how we can contribute to that and figure out how we can, put our chips in and help make that come faster so we can build the applications that we want to build for Coinbase and we can enable everyone around the world to build those applications and use them, in a really easy way. And so that's what Base is. Base is basically our contribution to scaling Ethereum and to making it so anyone can build and use on-chain apps in a way that just works. And our vision is to bring 1 million builders, 1 billion users, or you can just say 1 billion builders on chain over the next decade. And we're off to a pretty good start. We launched the testnet in February. We then spent a bunch of time just testing and battle testing. We launched the mainnet in the beginning of August, and we just crossed 100,000 ETH bridge to Base. We were the fastest layer 2 to 100,000 daily active users. We've seen all sorts of really cool, fun, novel use cases on Base, whether it's Base Paint, like I was talking about, which is like a collaborative painting game where people are earning money and creating beautiful works of art, or Friend Tech, That's a new social app. There's just people who are building and creating on Base, and it's been so inspiring to see.
There's so much I want to unpack there. I'll give a quick shout out to our first interaction, which was at the XMTP meetup, Masari Mainnet, I want to say 2021. And I'm pretty sure at that point you were in your sabbatical energy. You were like,
I was in the trying to figure out what's up phase.
You was like, I really want to figure out what to do here. I don't really know like where to go with this or whatever. So I just like want to give a quick shout out to your conviction for just being so clarifying in your vision of being able to actually like find something that really channeled this energy of discovery and like empowerment. Because I remember at that time you just I remember our conversation, it was so natural because we both just had such a clear vision. For context, XMTP is an on-chain messaging protocol. You couldn't even use it at the time. It didn't even exist. Yeah, but me and you were both investors and we were like, we know on-chain messaging is going to work. How is that going to happen? And there was so many question marks that it's just been amazing to watch your journey and you really taking on such a big endeavor, but doing it in a way that feels really aligned with your intention from, basically 4 years ago when you first joined Coinbase in the first place.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I remember back then, I remember meeting you and I was like, you were working on the cutting edge stuff around on-chain communities that I was interested in and figuring out like, how do you build on-chain DAOs? And, I'm grateful that we connected then and that we've gotten to build like a real friendship and, creative collaboration over the last now 4 years. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And also shout out that you pulled up to the music NFT event in Denver. That was something that really just like solidified my belief in you and Base and us working together because that was that meant a ton to me, man. That really did.
Yeah, well, that was an awesome event. And I showed up to that event. That was ETH Denver. So we had just launched the testnet, and that was like at the end of ETH Denver. And so we launched the testnet. I had done back to back to back, like for literally 5 days. And this was Saturday night. And I showed up to Coop's event. He invited me. I was like, I definitely want to be here. Like, this is it. And I got there and I was so tired. And I was just sitting literally by myself, just sitting there. And this woman sat down next to me and she just started talking to me. And her name is Keely. And we got to talking and she was like, oh, you're Jesse, you work on Base? Like, let me introduce you to some people. And that was when I met Adam. And then Adam connected me to all of these other people. And I literally had been sitting there being like, I'm so tired. I don't know if I can do this. And then people just brought me in and they said, you can be here. You can connect, you can be a part of this. And it ended up being such an incredible evening. And so I'm so grateful I was there. Like, honestly, that was the beginning of Onchain Summer.
It really was.
Like, literally, it really was. Like, that was inception point where like if I hadn't come, if I hadn't met Keely and hadn't met Adam and Adam hadn't introduced me to all these people, there's no way we would have been able to do Onchain Summer. It wouldn't have even really come together because so many of the people who were there were the people who like incepted the idea in the world and then collaborated in making the last few months come together. So man, special.
Right. And in the spirit of a new chapter, I mean, I feel like that's the first place you probably met Rio and Daniel and so many other people that are such pivotal members of the on-chain music community. All those. And I think for me, the important thing to highlight is that when we throw those events, I think that a lot of people are used to going to crypto conferences at this point. They're used to going and doing the things where they walk around, have a couple drinks, shake hands, talk about decentralization, scalability, etc. I was like, I just want to put on a good party, man. Like, I just want there to be good music. I want people to dance. Like, I want people to forget that they're at a crypto thing and just be at a music thing. You know what I mean? And I think that energy of just like opening up the spirit of what it means to just be present in this on-chain environment, it really symbolizes the culture that I think is so paramount for this next chapter of just being on-chain in general. Because as I said earlier with being in LA, I think that the cultural significance of being an active member of the on-chain community is the major thing that we need to focus on. I don't care as much about like creators getting paid, etc. That's going to happen as a byproduct. But I think the way that happens in mass is that people need to care about being on-chain because it's culturally significant. And if we can figure out how to make it culturally significant, all of those other things will happen as a result. But I do not think that it will happen unless it is culturally significant in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, it's so interesting the way you frame that of like, you just want people to show up at a music event. And I feel like it's the same thing with the word on chain, where it's like, we don't want people to get like stuck in like, oh, this is crypto, blah, blah. It's like, no, this is just music. It's just music plus plus because it's
Mm,
enabled by this incredible platform that we're building together. So I don't know. I feel so grateful for all of the time and effort you've put into creating those spaces, because I do feel like it's just brought something new and brought something creative and brought a new kind of energy into these communities that I've seen so many people benefit from.
totally. And it feels like we're still in a very early innings of it. And speaking of which, I want to talk about the launch of Base, because it's really funny to me to just watch new networks get stood up and watch the way in which people use them. For context here, my first experience with Base was the day that it launched. You could just send ETH over the bridge before there was a front end, and there was all sorts of degeneracy going on. I'm really curious to hear from your perspective, without going into too much detail. Did you expect the launch of the Base network to go the way that it did those first couple days?
No, definitely not. I mean, we had a whole, like this was really a lesson in crypto. We had a whole like plan that we'd like crafted, and it was like we're gonna first do the test net, and then we're gonna launch the network, and it's just gonna be for developers. So we're not gonna have any UIs. There's just gonna be documentation about how you can get ETH over, and then we're gonna open it up for bridging, and then we're gonna open it up for everyone to do everything. And like the plan started going great. Like we launched it just for developers before ETH Denver. Like everyone got the message. They were like, okay, developers, like let's go develop things. And people started building. And at this point we're coordinating like literally hundreds of different teams, which is what's led to this like kind of crazy bonanza that's happened for the last month. But we were really focused on coordinating things. And then the Saturday before we were planning to open Base up for bridging, like that night, someone was like, okay, I guess we're just going to do something crazy and start experimenting in non-developer ways. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, whoa, this is not part of the plan. And, you had to like get on Slack and figure out like, hey, what do we do? Do we need to respond? Like, how are we going to engage with this? And, we took a step back and we said, this is not part of the plan, but this is just crypto being crypto. Base is an open permissionless network. We've been communicating expectations around how we expect to roll it out. We're going to stick by those expectations, but also we're going to let people do what they're going to do, because at the end of the day, that's what makes crypto a special place. And so I fretted a lot for the next 5 days. I was like, should we not do this two-phase thing of opening for bridging and then opening for everything? Should we pull up opening for everything? Should we change plans? I very, very stressful few days. And we ultimately just decided to keep everything as we planned. And everything, it worked. Like people then
Yeah.
started bridging more when we opened up for bridging, and then we opened up for everything. Like everything was ready to go. And people were there, they were minting, they were launching cool games, Friend Tech launched, like all these things that we had planned and all these things that we hadn't planned kind of came together because we just trusted the process, trusted our intuitions, and then trusted that, even if crypto was crypto, we needed to embrace that and like try and make that be a part of our story.
I fucking love that spirit, and I think it's so important for this podcast, because one thing I've struggled with on-chain music is that the music industry is very guarded in how it works, and I think that this ideology of like trust the process, open source building, let people do what they do, I've really struggled to find the right way to bring that energy into building around the music economy, because I think it's not a spirit that's regularly talked about. And I think, if we would think about the word on-chain, that's a spectrum. We can go from the person who mints a picture for a free mint on Zora to
Right.
the MEV bot master who is like 5 levels deep and able to bridge to Base before there's a UI. And like, I think it's just fascinating to recognize the depth of that rabbit hole, because to me, that's what really is so fascinating about being on chain, is that it's not just like buying something as a free mint for $1. It's all those people who are just ripping ETH over the bridge in the first 28 hours and buying the most degenerate shitcoins you could ever think of, because that's just what being on chain is.
Yep.
You just follow the chain, you see where people are going. And to your point, I really do think it took leadership like you to be able to navigate that, where you could have taken that the complete opposite way and been like, we do not condone this. This is a Coinbase backed project. Like all this experimentation needs to get shut down. But you're just like, yo, hands off, trust the process. This is like on chain at its finest. And I think it really did set the foundation for all this to happen.
Yeah, well, I will say it's looking back, I'm like, great, trusted the process. That was awesome. But even like going through that, and then I have experiences like this almost every day where some things go wrong because crypto is chaotic. And my first response is to try and control. It's like, I want to control it. I want to manage. I want to make it so it doesn't happen that way. And a lot of the work that I feel like I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is like letting go and being like, it's okay. Like things aren't going to be perfect. Not everything's going to go according to plan. Things are going to break. People are going to, get mad because when things break, people get mad and they don't have all the context. But that like uh, generative and kind of chaotic nature of crypto is also what allows incredible things to emerge that we can never predict. And
Yep.
so, kind of just being in that and accepting it and being willing to be like, this is it. This is what it is. This is part of the process. We just need to do our best to ride the waves and learn at every turn when we make mistakes or when we see other things happening in the industry, and then apply those learnings in the best way we know how. I feel like that's kind of all we can do.
100%. I think it's such a powerful philosophy, and it ties a lot back into what we started this conversation out in, and saying that people who are on chain are 100x more likely to build better on chain products because they just use these applications. And I think that's both from a technical standpoint, that's from like a product standpoint, and from a philosophical standpoint. I feel like the people who are really able to see success in this world are the ones who understand that there is a certain way of life that comes with being on chain. People rug, projects go to zero. It's not like everything's like meant to go out and like try and take your life savings because they have a vendetta against you. It's just sometimes people are incompetent or inorganic or whatever you want to call it. But I think that there's a big piece of at least being on chain today with how early it is that is just a big surrender experiment and recognizing that you could have something go terribly wrong, but it doesn't mean you need to give up on the space forever. It's just a learning experience to get better the next time around.
It's the frontier. And I think this is also one of the things that we're going to be able to do really well and uniquely with Base and Coinbase is I think Base is going to be able to remain that frontier where everything is kind of chaotic and you have that generativeness that comes from that. And through our collaboration with Coinbase, we're going to be able to help create more curated experiences where that's
Right.
not always the case, right? Where for like my mom, like literally, my mom has loved Onchain Summer, and she loved the Rainbow World Citizen Mint, which Rainbow did with AdWorld, and she texted me like for 3 days. She was like, I need to get a Rainbow World Citizen. And I was like, okay, like I'm gonna help you. And so I sent her ETH and helped her get it. I helped her customize it, and she's been a champ and has crushed it. But she needs more affordances basically to figure out
Yeah.
how to do this safely, how to not get scammed, how to make sure that she's interacting with trustworthy things. And I think we're gonna be able to do both in a way that's going to be really powerful for both enabling that massive creativity that comes from this kind of like open, creative, generative, chaotic thing that is crypto, and providing kind of trusted interfaces that give people more confidence who are earlier in their journey or don't actually have interest in being on the frontier. They're like happy to be a little bit behind the frontier and make sure that they have a really easy to use, trusted experience.
I think one of the most powerful moments from Onchain Summer thus far was when Brian tweeted out basically saying, like, I recognize there are shortcomings in the interaction between Coinbase and the Base network. And I think the open acknowledgement of that, of saying that we can do a better job of making Coinbase an easier experience to do things on chain, was such a monumental moment. Like, I can't describe just seeing that acknowledgement of like, there is a gap here that we need to fix, just to me was the most bullish sign in the world, because it symbolized to me that there is going to be a world where we can have millions of people minting on a daily basis, because companies are now recognizing that they need to allocate resources towards making these products easier to use. And that really starts at the top down. And I think that's just such a pivotal moment for the space as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, On-Chain Summer, there are really two parts of it and why we did it. One was, you know, launch Base and make that exciting and fun and build a bunch of energy around it. The other was create a forcing function to get Coinbase, like, and every Coinbase employee on chain every day, right? Because going back to what I said at the beginning, like if Coinbase wants to move on chain, and we know that the best predictor of being able to build on chain products is using on chain products, how do we get all the people at Coinbase using on-chain products? And it's a big company. There's a lot of people who come from non-crypto backgrounds, and that's a whole journey. And I think one of the things that On-Chain Summer has done really well is it's activated literally thousands of Coinbase employees to get on-chain, literally thousands. And they're minting and they're experimenting with wallet. They're posting feedback in the feedback channels. And they're starting to build things too. Like I was just in a channel yesterday where a security engineer was like, "Hey, I just built my first on-chain app on Base. Here it is." And I was like,
So
"Let's
sick.
go!" Like this is it. We did an Onchain Summer hackathon 2 weeks ago, and we had like a ton of people build a ton of really cool on-chain products. And I've been helping run hackathons at Coinbase for 7 years now. And this was far and away the best hackathon because
Hmm.
everyone like actually built on chain. They like
Right.
wrote smart contracts. They like used Base. They did all these things that we've been trying to get people to do, but we could never really get people over the hump on. And that cultural shift, the shift of getting every Coinbase employee to go on chain every day, getting people to start to build on chain, getting people to have this in their head, that I think is going to be the single largest impact of Onchain Summer. And I think Brian does a great job of capturing it. As we've done that, what we've learned is it is day one. Maybe it's day zero. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is
Mm-hmm.
so much work that we need to do. And that work spans Base and making it cheaper and more scalable and more decentralized. It also spans Coinbase and making it easier to use, more trusted, making these things work better together, supporting all of the incredible creators and builders and applications that are launching. Like that work is going to be the work of the next decade. But at least now we know we need to do it. And we're like openly engaging with like, okay, like we got hard work in front of us. We have a lot of improvements to make. Let's go make them.
100%. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me early on was I remember you guys were doing some of these mirror posts talking about, the Base testnet, doing these mints that were just like free open editions. And you were getting something crazy like 400,000 mints, you know what I mean? Like, and people just like insane numbers. And obviously you can start to argue that like maybe those all aren't organic specific people, but me seeing those numbers for the first time of like a collection having 400,000 mints was such a major unlock. I'm really curious to hear when you were designing Base and what you think about what success looks like for you. How do you think about this notion of like mints being an indicator of success on chain and kind of just this whole question around how do we start to actually track, real retention and traction on chain?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we really, when we're thinking about what success looks like for Base, we have kind of our North Star, which is like a million builders, a billion users. And that's basically what we look at on a weekly basis, daily basis. It's like how many people are doing real transactions on Base, whether that's a mint or a send or a swap, or any of the other things that people, a friend share action, a friend tech action. That's one big one. The second is how many people are building on Base. Like we can look at smart contract deploys, we can look at the uniques of that. We can see like who are engaged folks who are actually creating on this new platform. And then the third one is how many people are creating on Base. Like who's
Mm.
making new mints? What are they? And how well retained are they? And so those are really the three things we're looking at. And it's a dual multi-sided ecosystem. And so a lot of my work today and the work of Onchain Summer and beyond is figuring out like how do we nurture all of those sides? How do we make sure that there's fun things for everyday people to do? How do we make sure that the developers have all the tools that they need in order to build the next generation of applications? And then how do we give the resources, the tools, the education to creators so that they're actually bringing all of their creativity on chain and creating, the next generation of music or art or whatever it is they're excited about. And so, I will say that it's still really early, right? Like if you're on chain today, you're part of the like 0.1% of the world that's on chain.
Literally.
And so over the next, literally, and so over the next decade, we got to get 100% of the world on chain. And that's going to be a journey. It's going to require a lot of hard work from all of us. It's not going to be done by any one chain or company or person. It's going to be all of us coming together to create something special.
I think the question I've been asking myself is what does the inflection point for being on chain look like relative to some of these past market segments? And to give you an example of this, I know that you're a big fan of CryptoPunks. You have a punk as your avatar that you wear all the time. Punks on mainnet were so significant because it represented a community of people who were very culturally aware of what was happening. And then there was a financial barometer of saying like this NFT is expensive, which means that there is value in owning one of them. I think the question I've been wondering is like for a network like Base and for really any layer two in general, like what does the equivalent of punks look like on layer two? Is it a collection that has 10 million mints? Is it something that just has like a wider array of holders? Is it something completely different? Like, I'm really curious to hear where your mind goes when you think about indicators of success on these new networks, given their accessibility looks like from like a very fundamental standpoint.
I think it's a good question. I think we're still trying to figure out. I definitely think like number of unique minters is a good metric, and that's like kind of like number of unique daily transacting addresses or users. And I think like we're getting close to the point where we're going to start seeing that be in the millions. Like it's still
Mm-hmm.
really early, but like the best mints this summer have like hundreds of thousands of unique minters. And so I think we'll start to see that next kind of push to millions and tens of millions over the next year or so. I think that's a good one. I think another one that I this one's a little bit harder to measure, but just like how many useful things are people doing on chain? Like
Right.
what's actually accessible to people? Like, minting and collecting is one behavior, but it's just one behavior, right? Like there's also payments that people are starting to do on chain. There's also trading and speculation that people are starting to do on chain. And so I think there's something like um, it's kind of like the product of number of people and number of actions or number of like real useful things that those people do on chain. And
Right.
that like product is the like, value that the chain is kind of bringing to the world.
I think for me, it's the foundation for on-chain earnings that gets me so excited because I feel like we're starting to reach a
Hmm.
world now where when you're collecting, it's no longer you thinking about investing every time. I think what happened with NFTs and with DeFi is that every time you would buy something, you would treat it as if you were investing in a stock and you would look at it as
Yeah.
like, I'm making this cost basis entry and I expect to have this exit with it. I think the difference
Yeah.
in behavior with minting on, Base is that I don't have an expectation of minting a picture for free and then being able to sell it for $100 later. But what I
Yeah.
think that's powerful is that it creates additional layers where you can still have those same questions, but a little bit higher up the stack. And to give an example of
Mm.
that, if a creator is minting their music, they're minting their art, they're minting their podcast, etc., you can start to generate sufficient on-chain earnings that can go back into a treasury or a pool that now this creator actually
Yep.
has like a real foundation of on-chain earnings. And I think that's why things like friend tech have become so popular is because I think people are excited about this idea of being able to back and support creators. I think they're excited about this idea of being able to invest in creators. But I think historically we've taken that investment and gone so granular to the fact that this
Yep.
investment only ever happens at the content layer that I think there needs to be more of a focus of like people just buy t-shirts and they buy concert tickets and they don't have an expectation of making money off of it. But because you're now
Yeah.
starting to buy the t-shirts and the concert tickets online and on chain, it kind of creates this ecosystem where you can now focus on this creator's on-chain economy. And my,
Yeah.
thesis is that that ballpark is going to be where we're going to start to see really interesting things start to emerge.
100%. We're going to start having millions of people who are earning on chain from their creativity, and then because those earnings are natively on chain, they're going to be able to do all sorts of things with them, including supporting the next generation of people who are earning on chain. And so
Right.
I think we're at the very beginning of literally the whole world being rewritten, and all these systems that we've all kind of gotten used to, but are pretty broken and have been
Mm.
around for like 50 years, getting upgraded and turned into new systems that are powered by this incredibly powerful on-chain platform that I think are going to make people's lives a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, people look at me like I'm crazy because I'm so fundamentally focused on just like figuring out the future of the on-chain economy. Like, just to give some visibility here, when we work with artists, we don't focus on Spotify, we don't focus on like the traditional metrics that people always talk about. And people always look at me, they think I'm crazy when I'm like, this on-chain world can be just as big, if not bigger than Spotify, because they just look at it for what it is today. And to me, it's so obvious that there can be a world where you can have millions of mints and you can have millions of fans that all exist on-chain. That I think the challenge here is making this, it's what I said earlier, it's making creators fundamentally feel like being on-chain is culturally significant enough that it can actually benefit their career in a significant way, and that it's not just a distraction or something that's like a get-rich-quick scheme. Because right now, I think a lot of creators are very locked into, yeah, this Web3 space is cool, but it's not actually value added towards my wider mission of
Yep.
becoming a successful artist. And I'm really excited about this world. We can kind of bring those two things together.
Yep, 100% agreed. That's what it's all about, giving people the platform to build their livelihoods and build their creativity. So I'm super excited too. I mean, I don't think there's anything more meaningful that we can be working on with our lives right now than upgrading these systems and bringing the whole world into them so that they can benefit from all of the incredible power and sovereignty that they come with.
That's right. And I want to give a quick shout out to the Onchain Summer Mint that's happening today as we're recording this. We had the Bonfire, Loners, UFO Club drop go live. Amazing collaborators, amazing partners. And I guess in closing thoughts here, I want to just hear from you from a very high level. How have you felt about Onchain Summer as a whole? Where's your mind at with this next chapter? And just in closing thoughts here, where do you think we go post Onchain Summer and the continuous support and empowerment of this movement.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I felt really proud and grateful of the last month and last few months of the summer. I think that it's been so energizing to have all of these people come together and believe in this vision of the world coming on chain. And so I'm just really grateful and proud of that. In terms of where we go from here, I mean, from here on out, every season is on-chain season, right? Like this is the work. It's we got to go bring everyone on chain. And I think that, we're going to take a little beat after what's been a really hard push for the last few months. But then we're going to just keep pushing and keep figuring out how do we support creators? How do we support builders? How do we make all these things easier for everyday people? And I think, we have my intuition is that we've reached the inflection point where these products work. The people are here. We have the creativity, and now we just need to grow. And it's going to take time because growth takes time. But I think we're going to grow month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year until the whole world's on chain. And so I'm just excited to get to be a part of that. And for all the listeners listening, I'm excited that you're here with us. And I think we're going to create some really incredible things in the years ahead.
Well, it's been amazing having a conversation with you, man. I know you're a busy guy, but your influencer arc is one that's beautiful to see. I'm just very thankful to have gotten some FaceTime with you before you start to reach, hundreds of thousands of on-chain followers. So I really appreciate the time, man. It seriously goes a long way.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on the show and excited to keep building together, keep creating together. That's what it's all about. Thanks, Coop.
Of course. And I guess there's one last question for you. For people who are listening to this and they want to stay up with your journey, where's the best place to follow you and keep everything going?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on Twitter, Farcaster, Lens. I'm Jesse Pollak on all of them, JSSEPOLAK. You can follow me on Chain at jesse.xyz and m.jesse.xyz. Those are my two wallets. You can see all my activity there. Excited to get to build with y'all. If you have awesome things that you're building on chain, we'd love to support you to build them on Base, and love to help you, build incredible products that bring the next wave of people on chain.
I love it. Well, it was a fascinating conversation, man. Here's to being on chain, and I look forward to many more conversations to come.
Yeah, me too.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Cheers.